This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring former FBI Special Agent and Chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, Robin Dreeke.
When you look at her history, she's only been in the position since about 2020, but she has been working within the court system for many years prior, but only a few years in this exact role. One would have to wonder a little bit if you go into a job, into a position you've never held before, and I don't know how much she knew about this position or did not know. She was elected into it, so I'm assuming she knew quite a bit. I don't think she can claim ignorance here. But in some cases, if the culture has always been like that, since you've been in it, and you've never worked in any other place, any other setting where that was not the culture, you wouldn't necessarily know that this is not how it works everywhere, even if you know what you're doing may be wrong. I think a lot of industries have those sort of things where eventually they get referendums on them and it goes, oh, maybe this is a bad thing. An example I would have would be when I worked in music radio forever. Back in the days, you would have record labels that would pay you directly. It essentially was a bribe to get certain songs on the air. Then eventually, and when I started, that was the norm. It wasn't even talked about as being wrong. And I just saw like my bosses doing this and then thinking, well, this is really kind of amazing. Like you can earn money this way. That's great. But then as I grew and I started going to different stations and different places and I started learning, oh shit, that's really not right. That's unethical. And then you go, oh, I'm not going to be a part of that sort of part of the game, even though others may be. It does make you wonder if there's just so much of that going on in South Carolina in these specific areas that most people, not only do they participate in it, but maybe they are unaware that this is not the norm in every single place and of the ethical violations that it includes when they partake in this sort of behavior. I'm not excusing her. I think she should probably be aware of that. But I'm saying if you're new to this, you're going into that courthouse to work and this is going on, that's the norm.
I'm with you. And here's another thing you and I have said multiple times too. Just because it's unethical doesn't mean it's illegal.
Sure.
And what happens is when you start having a pattern of behavior of doing unethical things for personal gain, because that's what everyone does, it's accepted, and you're not judged and shamed for being self-serving, you start losing an understanding of what law is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's going on in South Carolina, but we're not just seeing it in South Carolina. We're seeing it everywhere. Yeah. I mean, just take that optic back and look at government as a whole right now.
Sure.
People are doing very unethical things, but boy, they know exactly where that law line is. Mm-hmm. And they're riding it. And some people fall over it and don't even realize it. And I think that's what's going on down here is when unethical behaviors become the norm because everyone's doing it and you don't even think of it as unethical. Believe me, if you were to interview her and ask her and put her on a polygraph and ask her if she did anything unethical, she's not going to say no. She's not going to say she did anything because you start believing and rationalize your own behavior when you're self-serving it. It's part of the human condition. We only consume information that validates their own self-opinion. And people do not like thinking negative things about themselves, especially if they're unethical.
And I would imagine
that's what the culture is.
I would imagine behavior like this also doesn't just start at the extreme end of going and tampering with a jury.
Nope.
I'm assuming like when she got in there, maybe there was a little thing here, a little thing there. Hell, maybe even her predecessor did this sort of shit. I have no idea where you learn this behavior from someone and go, oh, that's okay to do. It makes me wonder, how did that arc, end up going all the way to the top where we see she finally gets arrested? Where did this begin? What were the first steps of unethical behavior that led to this extreme where we're going to end up very likely with a new Alex Murdaugh trial? And God knows however many other cases are going to as well, simply because she was present and part of the system.
Yeah, we don't know until we have a good conversation, someone does a good interview with her and discovers, like you said, the life arc. Who trained her into this position? Because for some reason, she thought this was completely appropriate what she did. Mm-hmm. And it probably flabbergasted her that that she caused all this because this is what she saw, this is what she learned, this is what she observed. I don't think she went like most people don't. She didn't go from 0 to 100 and say, hey, I got a great idea out of the blue. I'm going to write a book. And as the book is under pressure, you get emotionally tied to the outcome of getting the publication out on time. The publishers are beating on her and make sure this happens. And it helps you start rationalizing your inappropriate, unethical behavior of talking to the jury to make sure X, Y, and Z to serve your own needs. There you go.
Should there be more restrictions in place? Can there be more restrictions in place around courtrooms and around cases? Because obviously there are always high-profile cases going on. And if you're pretty close to that fire, here's a prime example. You can influence it in some way, shape, or form. It's even if you have a very minuscule title, something far less than the clerk of court. But if you're around these people, speaking up in some way, shape, or form and expressing opinion on this could have detrimental effects. Writing a book while the case is going on could have detrimental effects. Should there be restrictions of simply almost non-disclosure, like where, look, if you're involved in this case and you're not a juror who was randomly selected, but you chose to be here, either you went up for election for this position or you simply applied for the job and were accepted, we're sorry, you can't write books about the shit that goes on here until you have quit your job, left your job, whatever, how many years after maybe, then we don't have this risk of these people being in these positions trying to find ways to profit far greater than they would ever make on the actual job itself.
I'm surprised there wasn't. For me, like even in the FBI, I wrote 3 books before I retired. And in order for me to write a book, I had to have approval to even speak to a publisher or an agent through my chain of command. Yeah. And the first questions my chain of command would ask me were, when you write in this book, because if you're writing a book, do you have enough time to do your job?
Yeah, sure.
And then you had to get outside of employment approval and authority. I mean, the checks and balances in order to publish anything, even an article, were huge inside the government. And so this is showing if they don't have that kind of policy in place down there, they're definitely going to be instituting it, because if she's in the middle of a trial and writing a book, what job isn't she doing?
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. That's the biggest question.
It's not serving the public trust at all.
Well, it's almost like she added some job duties, it seems, to herself. One of those being, let's influence the jury with her opinion.
The taxpayers are paying her salary, and that's not what she's paid to do. That's why there's all these checks and balances and approvals to do things that are self-serving, because you're not being paid by the profit of what you're producing, for public consumption. You are actually being paid by the taxpayers to provide a public service under a public trust, and she broke it.
You're consuming the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts, and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member, exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast, dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.